My son David sent me that text at 2:47 a.m. on a Tuesday. 47 years after I gave birth to him. 23 hours after I'd driven 6 hours through a blizzard to babysit his twins while he and his wife Jessica took their mental health weekend to Aspen. By 3:15 a.m., I'd made 3 phone calls that would change everything. If you're watching this, buckle up because this story gets wild. Hit that subscribe button and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I need to know I'm not alone in this madness. You want to know how a mother becomes a stranger to her own child? It doesn't happen overnight. It's like watching a house rot from the inside. By the time you notice the damage, the foundation is already gone. Let me paint you a picture of who I was before this nightmare began. My name is Margaret, I'm 71 years old, and until 6 months ago, I thought I was living the American dream. My husband Thomas died 3 years ago, leaving me with a beautiful house in Connecticut, a healthy investment portfolio, and what I believed was a loving family who needed me. David is my only child. I was 24 when I had him, and Thomas and I poured everything into raising him right. Private schools, soccer camps, college tuition at Yale. We never said no. When he married Jessica 12 years ago, I welcomed her with open arms. When they had twins, Lily and Max, now 8 years old, I became the doting grandmother who showed up for every birthday, every school play, every scraped knee. I thought that's what family meant. I thought love was measured by how much you give, not by what you receive in return. The warning signs started small. Phone calls that went straight to voicemail. Invitations to family dinners that came with conditions. Mom, can you pick up groceries on your way? Also, we need you to watch the kids Sunday so we can go to brunch. Every interaction became a transaction, but I was too blinded by love to see it. The Tuesday that changed everything started like any other manipulation. Jessica called me at 7 a.m., voice dripping with fake sweetness. Margaret, I hope I didn't wake you. David and I are just so stressed with work and the kids. We desperately need a break. Could you possibly watch Lily and Max this weekend? We found this amazing wellness retreat in Aspen, but it's only available this weekend. Now let me be clear about something. I live in Boston. They live in Hartford, Connecticut. That's 6 hours of driving on a good day. But when your daughter-in-law says she's stressed, when your son needs a break, you don't think about your needs. You think about theirs. Of course, sweetheart. I heard myself saying, what time should I be there? Well, the retreat starts Friday evening, so maybe Thursday night? You're such a lifesaver, Margaret. The kids will be so excited to see Grandma Maggie. Grandma Maggie. That's what they'd trained the twins to call me, even though I'd always been grandma to other grandchildren in the family. Something about it felt diminishing, but I pushed those thoughts away. I spent Thursday preparing. Made their favorite cookies, chocolate chip for Max, snickerdoodles for Lily. Bought new coloring books, puzzles, ingredients for their favorite breakfast pancakes. I was excited to spend time with my grandchildren without their parents hovering and treating me like hired help. The drive to Connecticut was brutal. A February blizzard hit just as I crossed state lines, turning a 6-hour drive into an 8-hour nightmare of white knuckles and prayer. I kept thinking about Lily and Max, about the stories I'd read to them, about the fort we'd build in the living room. I arrived at their house at 11 p.m., exhausted but happy. David met me at the door, and I immediately knew something was wrong. His hug was stiff, perfunctory. No warmth, no genuine gratitude for the hell I'd just driven through to help them. Thanks for coming, Mom. Jessica's already asleep. She wanted to be fresh for tomorrow. The kids are excited you're here. That was a lie. When I went to their rooms to say goodnight, both Lily and Max seemed surprised to see me. Not excited. Surprised. Like they hadn't been told I was coming. Grandma Maggie, why are you here? Lily asked, clutching her stuffed rabbit. Your parents are going on a little trip, so I'm here to take care of you. But we already have babysitters, Max said, confused. Mrs. Chun always watches us when they go away. Mrs. Chun, the regular babysitter they'd never mentioned. The one they paid instead of guilt-tripping family members into 8-hour drives through blizzards. I kissed them goodnight and went to the guest room, that familiar knot forming in my stomach. The room was cold. They'd obviously forgotten to turn up the heat. There were no fresh towels in the bathroom, no water glass by the bed. Small things, but they added up to one message. You're not really welcome here. Friday morning, David and Jessica were packed and ready to leave by 6 a.m. Jessica breezed through the kitchen like a tornado, giving me rapid-fire instructions about the kids' schedules, dietary restrictions, and emergency contacts. She was treating me like a stranger hired from a babysitting service. The kids have soccer practice Saturday at 9 a.m., but only if it's not raining. Max has been having nightmares about clowns, so no circus movies. Lily can't have dairy after 3 p.m. or she gets stomach aches. Here's the pediatrician's number. Here's poison control. Here's the emergency contact list. I wanted to scream. I raised your husband. I think I can handle 8-year-olds. But I smiled and nodded and took notes like a good little employee. David kissed the kids goodbye, gave me another one of those awful stiff hugs, and they were gone. Off to their luxury spa weekend while I stood in their kitchen, watching their car disappear into the morning fog. The weekend with Lily and Max was lonely. These children, who I'd loved since before they took their first breath, felt like polite strangers. They answered my questions with one-word responses. They asked for Mom and Dad constantly. When I suggested we build a fort or bake cookies, they looked at me like I was speaking a foreign language. Mom doesn't let us use the good blankets for forts, Lily said when I pulled out some beautiful throws from the living room. Dad says sugar makes us hyperactive, Max added when I offered to make cookies. Every suggestion I made was met with some rule or restriction their parents had apparently drilled into them. I felt like an outsider in their lives, following a script written by people who couldn't be bothered to include me in writing it. But the worst part was how they talked about me when they thought I couldn't hear. Saturday evening, while I was cleaning up after dinner, I heard them in the playroom. Why is Grandma Maggie here instead of Mrs. Chun? Lily asked. Because she's free, Max said matter-of-factly. Mom said Grandma Maggie likes to help, so we don't have to pay her. Free. That's what I was to them. Free labor. Free babysitting. Free money when they needed it. But not family. Never family. Sunday morning, David and Jessica returned from Aspen glowing, tanned, relaxed, full of stories about their amazing couples massage and their breakthrough meditation session. They barely acknowledged that I'd spent 3 days caring for their children. How were they? Jessica asked, already distracted by sorting through mail. Wonderful. We had a great time. Good. Traffic shouldn't be too bad if you leave in the next hour. That was it. No thank you. No how can we repay you. No invitation to stay for lunch or even a cup of coffee before my 6-hour drive home. Just a dismissal like I was a service they'd finished using. I hugged Lily and Max goodbye. Lily whispered in my ear. Grandma Maggie, next time you come, can you bring Mrs. Chun instead? She plays better games. The knife went straight through my heart. I drove home in a daze, my mind spinning with all the small cruelties, all the ways they'd made me feel unwanted while still expecting me to drop everything for them. By the time I reached Boston, something had hardened inside me. I was sitting in my kitchen at 2 a.m., still wearing my coat, still processing the weekend from hell when my phone buzzed. David's name appeared on the screen. We need space from you. Please don't reach out anymore at all. That was it. No explanation. No context. Just banishment after I'd spent 3 days caring for his children while he got couples massages in Colorado. I stared at that text for 10 minutes, reading it over and over, waiting for the follow-up message. The just kidding, or the I meant to send this to someone else, or something that would make it make sense. But nothing came, so I made 3 phone calls. The first call was to my lawyer, Patricia Williams, at 2:52 a.m. Margaret, is everything all right? It's almost 3 in the morning. Patricia, I need you to remove David from my will. All of it. Tonight. Margaret, what's happened? This seems very sudden. I've been dismissed from my son's life via text message. If he doesn't want me in his life, he doesn't get my death to fund his. Patricia was quiet for a long moment. She'd handled my estate planning for 15 years. She knew how much David stood to inherit. Nearly $800,000 in life insurance, plus the house, plus my investment accounts. Close to $1.2 million total. I'll draft the papers first thing Monday morning. But Margaret, are you sure? Family disputes can be. I've never been more sure of anything in my life. The second call was to my financial advisor, Kevin Chun. Yes, the husband of Mrs. Chun, the babysitter my grandchildren preferred to me. Small world, savage irony. Kevin, I want to liquidate the education funds I set up for Lily and Max. All of it. I want it moved into my main account by the end of business Monday. Kevin knew about those accounts. I'd been putting $500 a month into each of them since the day they were born. 8 years of savings carefully invested, growing into a substantial nest egg for their future college expenses. Margaret, those accounts have almost $60,000 each. Are you sure you want to? David has made it clear I'm not part of their lives. I'm not funding the education of children whose parents don't want me around. I understand. I'll process the transfers first thing Monday. The third call was to my insurance company. I'd been paying for a life insurance policy that would leave David and his family financially secure when I died. Now I was changing the beneficiary to the American Red Cross. By 3:15 a.m., I'd effectively written my son out of my life the same way he'd written me out of his. But I wasn't done. Not even close. Monday morning brought a revelation that changed everything I thought I knew about my son's marriage. I was having coffee with my neighbor Helen. You know, the kind of neighbor who somehow knows everyone's business, but isn't gossipy about it. When she mentioned seeing Jessica at the country club. Oh, Margaret, I hope you don't mind me asking, but is everything all right with David and Jessica? I saw Jessica at the club Friday, and she seemed stressed. This caught my attention. Friday was the day they'd left for their Aspen retreat. The day they were supposedly so overwhelmed that they needed an emergency wellness weekend. Stressed how? Helen stirred her coffee thoughtfully. Well, she was meeting with Robert Kellerman. You know, the divorce attorney? They were at corner table, lots of papers spread out, very intense conversation. She looked like she'd been crying. The world stopped. Robert Kellerman, the most expensive divorce lawyer in Connecticut. The one who specialized in high-net-worth divorces where one party needed to hide assets from the other. Are you absolutely sure it was him? Positive. My sister-in-law went through her divorce with him last year. Cost her husband $50,000 just in attorney fees. He's ruthless but effective. I drove home in a daze. If Jessica was meeting with a divorce attorney, if she was planning to leave David, then that text message suddenly made perfect sense. They weren't asking for space from me out of some family dysfunction. They were cutting me off because they were planning to divorce, and they didn't want me to know until after Jessica had secured her position. But there was one massive flaw in their plan. Something they'd forgotten in all their scheming. I was the one who'd co-signed on their house. See, when David and Jessica bought their dream home in Hartford 5 years ago, they couldn't qualify for the full mortgage on their own. Their debt-to-income ratio was too high. So I'd co-signed, putting MY credit and MY assets on the line so they could have their white picket fence and their perfect neighborhood. If they were getting divorced, if they were planning to sell that house, or if Jessica was planning to claim half its value, they needed me to be cooperative. They needed me to sign papers, to agree to releases, to be a helpful little old lady who rubber-stamped their financial decisions. Instead, they just told me to disappear from their lives. Mistake number 1. I spent Monday afternoon making some very interesting phone calls. First, to the mortgage company. Hi, this is Margaret Thompson. I'm a co-signer on a mortgage for 47 Maple Street in Hartford. I need to understand my rights and obligations regarding this property. The loan officer Sandra pulled up the account. Mrs. Thompson, yes, I see you here. You're equally responsible for this mortgage. What can I help you with? If the primary borrowers were to divorce, what happens to my position as co-signer? Well, that depends on several factors. Do you suspect they might default on the loan? I thought about their spending habits. The constant vacations, Jessica's designer handbag collection, David's new Audi that I'd helped him finance. It's possible. If they default, we would pursue collection from all parties on the loan, including you. However, as a co-signer, you also have the right to be notified of any changes to the mortgage terms, any attempts to refinance, or any intentions to sell. They can't make decisions about this property without your knowledge and consent. This was getting interesting. What if I wanted to protect my interests in this situation? You could request to be notified immediately of any missed payments. You could also explore options for removing yourself from the loan, but that would require the other parties to qualify independently or find a replacement cosigner. In other words, if David and Jessica wanted to cut me out of their lives, they'd need to qualify for their mortgage without me. Something they couldn't do 5 years ago when they had better credit and less debt. Something they definitely couldn't do now. I hung up feeling like a chess player who just realized they had the other side in check, and the opponents hadn't even noticed yet. Tuesday brought more interesting intelligence. My hairdresser, Monica, bless her gossipy heart, mentioned that Jessica had been in the salon the previous week getting a very expensive color job and styling. Apparently, she'd been on the phone the entire time, talking to someone about liquidating assets and hiding money in her mother's accounts. Margaret, honey, I don't like to spread rumors, but she was talking about hiding money from her husband. Said something about moving funds around before he noticed. Sounded pretty serious. Now I was getting angry. Not hurt feelings angry. Strategically angry. They were planning to divorce. Jessica was planning to hide assets. And they decided the best way to handle the situation was to cut me off completely, so I couldn't interfere with their financial shenanigans. But they'd forgotten that I wasn't just David's mother. I was their creditor. I was their co-signer. I was financially entangled with them in ways that couldn't be dissolved with a nasty text message. Wednesday, I decided to test a theory. I drove to their house, the house I was legally responsible for, and parked across the street. I wanted to see what a normal day looked like in their life without me. What I saw was fascinating. At 10 a.m., a black SUV pulled into their driveway. Out stepped a man in an expensive suit carrying a briefcase. He spent 45 minutes inside their house. When he left, Jessica walked him to his car, and they had an intense conversation in the driveway. She handed him what looked like a thick envelope. At 2 p.m., Jessica left in her car with 2 suitcases. At 4 p.m., David came home early from work, saw that Jessica's car was gone, and immediately started making frantic phone calls in his driveway. Even from across the street, I could see his agitation. At 6 p.m., Mrs. Chen arrived to pick up the kids. By 7 p.m., David was alone in that big house, pacing back and forth in front of the living room windows like a caged animal. It looked like Jessica had run. Not just separated, fled. With suitcases and a plan, and probably a good portion of their liquid assets. Poor David. He had no idea what was coming. But I did. Thursday morning, my phone started ringing. David's name on the caller ID. I let it go to voicemail. He called again immediately. Voicemail. By noon, he'd called 17 times and left 12 voicemails. I finally listened to them while eating lunch. Message 1. Mom, please call me back. Something's happened with Jessica. Message 3. Mom, I really need to talk to you. Please pick up. Message 7. Mom, Jessica left. She took the kids to her mother's house and won't tell me why. I need your help. Message 12. Mom, please. I know I said we needed space, but that was Jessica's idea. She said you were getting too involved in our lives, but she's gone now and I don't know what to do. Please call me back. The truth finally comes out. It hadn't been David's idea to cut me off. It had been Jessica's. She'd wanted me out of the picture while she executed her exit strategy, and she'd manipulated my son into sending that devastating text message. But I still didn't call him back. Instead, I went to the bank and made a very interesting discovery. Remember the education funds I'd liquidated for Lily and Max? The $120,000 I'd moved back into my accounts? Well, it turns out those funds were set up as UTMA accounts, Uniform Transfer to Minors Act accounts. I was the custodian, but the money legally belonged to the children. By liquidating those accounts, I'd technically stolen from my own grandchildren. Now, before you judge me, understand that UTMA accounts are tricky. The custodian has broad discretion over how the money is used, as long as it benefits the minors. And I had a plan that would benefit them more than college funds ever could. But it also gave me tremendous leverage over their parents. Friday afternoon, I was reading in my garden when a car pulled into my driveway. David's Audi. He looked terrible, unshaven, rumpled clothes, eyes red with exhaustion. I watched him through my living room window as he sat in his car for 5 minutes, gathering courage. When he finally walked to my front door, his shoulders were slumped in defeat. The doorbell rang. I didn't answer. He rang it again, then started knocking. Mom? Mom, I know you're home. Your car is in the driveway. Please, I need to talk to you. I opened the door but didn't invite him in. David. Mom, thank God. I've been trying to reach you for days. Jessica left me. She filed for divorce and took the kids, and she's trying to claim half of everything, including the house. I need your help. I studied my son's face. 3 days ago, he'd banished me from his life. Now he needed my help. The audacity was breathtaking. Jessica told me you wanted space. She said I was too involved in your lives. She lied, Mom. She made me send that text. She said if I didn't cut you off, she'd leave and take the kids. But she was planning to leave anyway. She played me. And you let her. I was trying to save my marriage. I thought if I did what she wanted, if I chose her over you, she'd stay. But she was already gone, Mom. She'd been planning this for months. I leaned against my doorframe, not inviting him in. What exactly do you want from me, David? I need help with the house. The lawyers say since you're on the mortgage, Jessica can't force a sale without your agreement. But if you don't cooperate, I could lose everything. Please, Mom. I know I screwed up, but I'm begging you. There it was. The truth. He didn't want me. He wanted my signature. He wanted my cooperation. He wanted me to save him from the consequences of his choices. Just like always. Have you spoken to your children since Jessica left? She's not letting me talk to them. Says I need to go through her lawyer now. And where are you living? In the house. But I can't afford the mortgage payment on my own. I can barely afford food right now. Jessica emptied our joint accounts when she left. I felt something cold and satisfied settle in my chest. This was what happened when you treated family like disposable employees. This was what happened when you prioritized manipulation over love. I'm sorry to hear about your situation, David, but you told me not to reach out anymore. You asked for space. I'm simply honoring your request. His face crumpled. Mom, please. I know I hurt you, but you need space. That's what you said. So that's what I'm giving you. I closed the door and walked away, leaving my son standing on my porch. But I wasn't done with him. Not even close. Because David had forgotten something important about his mother. I wasn't just a convenient source of emotional support and financial bailouts. I was a strategist. And I was just getting started. Saturday morning brought the most satisfying phone call I'd received in years. It was Sandra from the mortgage company. Mrs. Thompson, I'm calling because we've received some concerning information about the property at 47 Maple Street. There's been a missed mortgage payment, and we've also received notification of pending divorce proceedings. As a co-signer, I wanted to make you aware. David had missed his first mortgage payment. The foreclosure clock was now officially ticking. What are my options, Sandra? Well, you could make the payment yourself to protect your credit. You could also initiate proceedings to have yourself removed from the loan, but that would require the other parties to refinance or qualify independently. What happens if they can't qualify independently? Then the loan would need to be paid in full, or the property would go into foreclosure. Perfect. Absolutely perfect. Sandra, I want to be notified immediately of any further missed payments. I also want to explore my options for protecting my interests in this property. Of course. I should mention that we've also received some unusual inquiries about this loan. Someone called yesterday asking about transferring the property to a third party. We told them that any transfers would require consent from all parties on the loan, including you. Jessica, trying to figure out how to cut me out of the deal entirely. Thank you for letting me know. I'll be in touch. After hanging up, I made myself a cup of coffee and started planning phase 2 of my strategy. David thought he needed my help to save his house and his financial future. What he didn't realize was that I held all the cards, and I was about to play them very strategically. My doorbell rang at 9 a.m. Through the window, I could see David again, but this time he wasn't alone. A woman in a business suit stood next to him, obviously his attorney. I answered the door with a pleasant smile. Good morning, David. Who's your friend? Mom, this is Karen Walsh, my lawyer. Karen, this is my mother, Margaret. Karen extended her hand. Mrs. Thompson, thank you for meeting with us. I understand you're a co-signer on David's mortgage. I am. Please come in. I led them to my living room, offered coffee, and settled into my favorite chair like we were having a social visit. Karen pulled out a legal pad and got straight to business. Mrs. Thompson, I'll be direct. David is in a very difficult position. His wife has filed for divorce and is claiming half the marital assets, including the house. However, since you're on the mortgage, she can't force a sale without your cooperation. I see. We're hoping you'll agree to a refinance that would remove you from the loan and allow David to keep the house. I sipped my coffee thoughtfully. Can David qualify for a refinance on his own? David shifted uncomfortably. Well, with Jessica gone, my income is lower, and my credit took a hit when she emptied our accounts. So that's a no. Karen jumped in. There are programs for divorced individuals, special considerations. But he doesn't qualify. Right now. Today. Silence. What exactly are you asking me to do? Karen consulted her notes. We'd like you to remain on the loan temporarily, while David rebuilds his finances. Maybe co-sign for a home equity loan, so he can buy out Jessica's portion of the house. Essentially, increase your financial liability to help David through this transition. I set down my coffee cup. So you want me to take on more risk, more debt, more responsibility, for a son who told me to disappear from his life? David leaned forward desperately. Mom, I explained that. Jessica made me send that text. I never wanted to cut you off. But you did. I was trying to save my marriage. By throwing me away. I thought it was temporary. I thought if I gave Jessica what she wanted, she'd stop threatening to leave. I was going to talk to you afterward. Explain everything, apologize. After you'd used me up and tossed me aside whenever it was convenient. Karen cleared her throat. Mrs. Thompson, I understand you're hurt, but we're talking about your son's financial survival here. If he loses this house, his credit will be destroyed. He might not be able to afford an apartment decent enough for visitation with his children. Ah, the emotional manipulation begins. Appeal to the grandchildren. Where are Lily and Max now? With Jessica at her mother's house in New Jersey, David answered. She enrolled them in school there. She's saying it's temporary, but her lawyer is arguing that New Jersey should be considered their primary residence now. And you're fighting for custody? Trying to. But if I don't have a stable place to live, if I can't prove I can provide for them. I understood. This wasn't just about the house. This was about David's ability to remain a father to his children. Jessica was using every weapon in her arsenal to cut him out of their lives, just like she'd manipulated him into cutting me out. But understanding someone's position doesn't mean you have to save them from it. Karen, what happens if I refuse to help? Honestly, David would probably have to declare bankruptcy. He'd lose the house, his credit would be destroyed, and his chances of getting meaningful custody would be severely compromised. And what happens to me in that scenario? The foreclosure would affect your credit as well, since you're a co-signer. You'd be liable for any deficiency if the house sells for less than the mortgage balance. David was staring at me with desperate eyes. Mom, please. I know I screwed up. I know I hurt you. But I'm your son. You can't just let my life fall apart. I studied his face. This man I'd raised, who I'd loved unconditionally for 47 years, who had thrown me away the moment his wife demanded it. David, answer me honestly. If Jessica hadn't left you, if your marriage was still intact, would you have ever apologized for that text message? He was quiet for a long moment. I don't know. I hope things would calm down and we could work it out. That's not an answer. Probably not immediately. Jessica was very clear that she didn't want you involved in our lives. And you agreed with her. I was trying to keep my family together. By destroying your relationship with me. Another silence. Karen tried to regain control of the conversation. Mrs. Thompson, with all due respect, we're not here to litigate past family dynamics. We're here to discuss a practical solution to a very immediate problem. I turned to her with a smile that didn't reach my eyes. Oh, but the family dynamics are exactly what we need to discuss. Because you're asking me to financially rescue someone who discarded me the moment it became inconvenient to love me. I never stopped loving you. David protested. You stopped showing it. You stopped choosing it. Love isn't a feeling, David. It's a series of actions, and your actions told me exactly where I stood in your priorities. I stood up, signaling that the meeting was over. Karen, thank you for explaining the situation. I need some time to think about this. How much time? She asked. The foreclosure process moves quickly once it starts. I'll let you know. After they left, I sat in my garden and thought about what I really wanted from this situation. Did I want revenge? Did I want David to lose everything as punishment for how he treated me? No, that wasn't who I was. But I also wasn't going to be taken for granted anymore. If David wanted my help, he was going to have to earn it. Not with desperate pleas or emotional manipulation, but with genuine change. Sunday evening I called David. Mom. His voice was hopeful, desperate. I've made my decision. And I'll help you keep the house. Oh, thank God, Mom, I'm not finished. I'll help you, but there are conditions. Silence. First, you're going to pay me rent. Fair market rent for a house that size in your neighborhood. I've researched it, $3,200 a month. Mom, I can't afford. Then get a second job. Or find roommates. Figure it out. Okay. What else? Second, you're going to pay me back every penny I put into that house. The down payment, the closing costs, all of it. We'll set up a payment plan. How much are we talking about? $68,000 plus interest. I heard him suck in a breath. Third, I want regular, meaningful contact with my grandchildren. Not convenient babysitting when you need free labor. Real relationship building. I want them to know their grandmother. Jessica won't like that. Jessica doesn't get a vote anymore. You're going to fight for custody, and part of that custody arrangement will include regular visitation with me. What if I can't get custody? Then you'd better fight harder. Because if I'm going to invest in your future, David, I need to see that you're willing to fight for the relationships that matter. Anything else? Yes. You're going to apologize. Not a quick sorry I hurt your feelings apology. A real one. One that shows you understand exactly what you did wrong, and why it was unacceptable. Another long silence. I can do that. Good. Because if you violate any of these conditions, if you take my help for granted, if you ever again choose someone else's manipulation over our relationship, I will pull my support immediately and permanently. I understand. Do you? Because this is your last chance, David. I'm 71 years old. I don't have time for people who treat me like I'm disposable. I understand, Mom. And I'm grateful. Don't be grateful yet. Be better. Monday morning, I called Patricia to stop the changes to my will. I also called Kevin to reinstate the education funds for Lily and Max, but with new conditions. The money would be held in trust until they were adults, and it would only be released if they maintained a relationship with me. I wasn't just rescuing my son's financial future. I was investing in a better relationship with my family, but I was doing it on MY terms this time, because love without boundaries isn't love. It's enabling. And I was done enabling people who took my love for granted. 3 months later, I was sitting in my favorite coffee shop when Karen Walsh called with news that changed everything. Margaret, we need to meet. Jessica's attorney has made an offer that's complicated. I agreed to meet her that afternoon, curious about what new drama was unfolding. When I arrived at her office, I found David there too, looking more stressed than I'd seen him since this whole mess began. What's going on? Karen spread a stack of papers across her conference table. Jessica's lawyer has presented a settlement offer. She's willing to give up her claim to the house entirely, deed it completely over to David, in exchange for a cash payment of $200,000. I blinked. Where exactly is David supposed to get $200,000? David shifted uncomfortably in his chair. That's what we need to discuss. Karen pulled out a financial projection. Based on the house's current value, if David could secure a home equity loan for $200,000, he'd own the property outright. Jessica would be out of the picture completely, and David would have full legal ownership. And who would co-sign this home equity loan? I asked, though I already knew the answer. Well, given David's current financial situation. Me. You want me to co-sign for another $200,000 of debt? David leaned forward. Mom, I know it sounds like a lot, but think about it. If we do this, Jessica can't touch the house anymore. She can't use it as leverage in the custody battle. The kids would have a stable home to visit. I studied the papers. The offer was actually brilliant from Jessica's perspective. She'd get a huge cash payout, have zero ongoing ties to the property, and David would be left drowning in debt that I'd be legally responsible for. What's the catch? I asked Karen. This seems too good to be true from Jessica's side. Karen hesitated. Well, there is one condition. She wants David to agree to limited visitation with the children. Every other weekend, supervised by a third party. Supervised? Why? David's face flushed red. She's claiming I have anger management issues. Says the stress of the divorce has made me unstable. And is that true? No. I mean, I've been frustrated, but I've never been violent or anything. She's just trying to paint me as an unfit parent. I looked at Karen. What does supervised visitation mean practically? David would see Lily and Max every other weekend, but a court-appointed supervisor would be present the entire time. It's expensive, about $200 per visit, and it severely limits what kind of relationship he can build with his children. So Jessica's plan was becoming clear. She'd get her $200,000, David would be buried in debt, and she'd still control his access to the children. Meanwhile, I'd be on the hook for a massive loan for a son who had already proven he'd throw me away when convenient. I need to see Jessica's financial disclosures, I said. Karen and David exchanged glances. Mom, why do you need? If I'm being asked to take on $200,000 in additional debt, I want to understand exactly what we're dealing with. Jessica didn't just disappear with suitcases and good intentions. She had a plan. I want to see her assets, her income, her whole financial picture. Karen nodded slowly. I can request those as part of the discovery process, but Jessica's attorney has been very protective of that information. Then make it a condition of any settlement discussion. Full financial disclosure from both parties or no deal. David looked panicked. Mom, if we start demanding things, she might withdraw the offer entirely. Then she withdraws it. David, you're thinking like a desperate man instead of thinking strategically. Jessica is offering to take $200,000 and walk away from a house worth $400,000. Why would she do that unless there's something we don't know? The room fell silent. I could see the gears turning in Karen's head. You think she's hiding assets, Karen said. I think Jessica is a lot smarter than anyone's giving her credit for. She spent months planning this divorce, remember? She's not making decisions based on emotion. She's making calculated moves. Over the next week, Karen worked her magic and obtained Jessica's financial disclosures. When she called me with the results, I wasn't surprised, but I was furious. Margaret, you were right. Jessica has been hiding significant assets. She's got $150,000 in an account under her maiden name that she never disclosed. She's also been moving money to offshore accounts through her mother. How much money? We're still tracking it, but at least another $200,000, possibly more. So Jessica had stolen from the marriage, hidden the money, and was now trying to get David to pay her $200,000 on top of what she'd already taken. The woman was running a masterclass in financial manipulation. Karen, here's what we're going to do. The next day, I found myself in the most surreal meeting of my life. Jessica had agreed to a face-to-face settlement conference, and she'd brought her mother, Eleanor, as support. I'd brought my own surprise guest, Kevin Chen, my financial advisor, who also happened to be a forensic accountant. Jessica looked different. Thinner, more polished, like she'd been working with an image consultant. Her hair was perfectly styled, her makeup flawless, her clothes expensive but conservative. She was playing the role of the innocent victim. Eleanor, on the other hand, looked like she wanted to be anywhere else. She kept shooting nervous glances at Jessica, and her hands were shaking. Margaret, Jessica said with a fake smile. Thank you for coming. I hope we can work something out that's best for everyone, especially the children. Of course. I'm sure we all want what's best for Lily and Max. Jessica's attorney, a sharp-dressed man named Richard Stone, laid out their offer again. As we discussed, my client is willing to relinquish all claims to the marital home in exchange for $200,000. This would give David complete ownership and provide Jessica with the capital she needs to start fresh. Start fresh where? I asked pleasantly. Jessica shifted in her seat. I'm looking at opportunities in California. Better schools for the children, fresh air, a chance to rebuild. California's expensive. Even $200,000 wouldn't last long there. I'm a resourceful person. Kevin leaned forward. Ms. Jessica, I've been reviewing the financial disclosures, and I have some questions about certain transactions. Jessica's smile flickered. What kind of questions? Well, there are several large cash withdrawals from your joint accounts over the past 6 months. $5,000 here, $8,000 there. What were those for? Household expenses, shopping, normal things. $47,000 in cash withdrawals for household expenses? The room got very quiet. Kevin continued. There's also the matter of the account under your maiden name at First National Bank. The one with $152,000 that wasn't disclosed in your initial fin. Richard, Karen said calmly, are you aware that your client has been hiding assets? Because that's a very serious problem in divorce proceedings. Eleanor suddenly spoke up. Jessica, tell them about the other accounts. Mom, shut up. No, I won't shut up. This has gone too far. Eleanor turned to the room. She's got money hidden all over the place. Accounts in my name, accounts in fake business names, even cryptocurrency. She's been planning this for over a year. Jessica looked like she wanted to crawl under the table. Kevin smiled. Would you like to tell us about the cryptocurrency, Jessica? Because blockchain transactions are actually quite easy to trace. The next hour was spectacular. Under pressure, Jessica's careful plan fell apart completely. Eleanor, apparently tired of being used as a money-hiding accomplice, revealed account numbers, passwords, and transaction records. By the end of the meeting, we'd identified over $400,000 in hidden marital assets that Jessica had attempted to steal. Richard Stone looked like he wanted to fire his client. I need to discuss with my client how she wants to proceed. Karen leaned back in her chair. Here's how she's going to proceed. Jessica will return every penny of the hidden assets to the marital estate. She'll agree to joint custody with no supervision requirements. And instead of paying her $200,000, she'll be lucky if she doesn't face criminal charges for asset concealment. Jessica finally found her voice. You can't prove any of this. Kevin placed a thick folder on the table. Actually, we can. Bank records, transaction logs, cryptocurrency wallet addresses, witness statements from your mother. Would you like to see the forensic accounting report I'm preparing? The fight went out of Jessica completely. She'd been caught and she knew it. What do you want? She whispered. I leaned forward. I want my son to have joint custody of his children with no supervision. I want all marital assets properly divided according to Connecticut law. And I want a formal apology for the hell you've put this family through. An apology? You manipulated my son into cutting me out of his life. You terrified my grandchildren. You tried to steal from your own marriage. Yes, I want an apology. Jessica looked around the room like a trapped animal. Her elaborate scheme had crumbled, and she was facing the possibility of criminal charges for financial fraud. I'm sorry, she said quietly. For what specifically? For hiding money. For making David send that text. For trying to keep the kids away from their father. And for treating you badly. For not respecting you as David's mother and the children's grandmother. It wasn't much, but it was something. 2 weeks later, the settlement was finalized. Jessica kept $50,000 and her car. David kept the house and his debt. They agreed to joint custody with a proper visitation schedule that included regular time with me. Most importantly, Jessica agreed to move back to Connecticut so the children could maintain stability in their lives. The financial mess took longer to sort out. David did end up needing that home equity loan, but for $100,000 instead of $200,000. I co-signed, but under strict conditions. He'd pay me back over 10 years with interest, and the loan was secured by life insurance policies that named me as beneficiary. I wasn't being cruel. I was being smart. The first time I had Lily and Max for a sleepover after the settlement, I made their favorite pancakes and we talked about everything that had happened. Grandma Maggie, Lily said, "Why did Mom and Dad get divorced?" I thought carefully about my answer. Sometimes grown-ups make mistakes when they're scared or angry. Your parents love you very much, but they couldn't figure out how to love each other anymore. Are you mad at Dad for that text message? Max asked, out of the mouths of babes. I was hurt, I said honestly. But your dad apologized and we worked it out. That's what families do when someone makes a mistake. We figure out how to fix it. Did Mom make mistakes too? Yes, she did. But she's working on being better, just like your dad is. It wasn't the whole truth, but it was age-appropriate. These children didn't need to know about hidden assets and manipulation schemes. They needed to know they were loved and that the adults in their lives were committed to doing better. 3 months after the settlement, David knocked on my door with a gift. It was a framed photo of all 4 of us, David, me, Lily, and Max, taken at the zoo the previous weekend. I wanted to thank you, he said. Not just for the house but for not giving up on me. For not letting me destroy our relationship permanently. You're my son, David. That doesn't change just because you make stupid decisions. He laughed. I made a lot of stupid decisions. Yes, you did. But you're learning. Can I ask you something? Why did you help me? After everything I put you through, why didn't you just let me lose the house and figure it out on my own? I considered the question. Because love isn't punishment, David. It's not about making people suffer for their mistakes. It's about creating boundaries that protect everyone, while still leaving room for growth and forgiveness. I don't understand. If I'd let you lose everything, if I'd walked away completely, what would that have taught you? That love is conditional? That family abandons you when things get hard? That's what Jessica taught you, and look how that turned out. He was quiet for a moment. Instead, I showed you that love has standards. That I won't be taken for granted, but I also won't abandon you when you need me most. I made you accountable for your choices while still giving you the tools to rebuild. It was expensive tools. I smiled. David, you're my only child. You and Lily and Max are my only family. What good is money if it doesn't protect and strengthen the relationships that matter most? I'm going to pay you back. Every penny. I know you will. And if you don't, I'll repossess your house. We both laughed, but he knew I wasn't entirely kidding. 6 months later, I was babysitting the kids again, but this time it was because David had a date. A nice woman named Sarah who taught 3rd grade, and didn't seem interested in his money because she didn't know he had any. She's pretty, Lily informed me while we made cookies. And she laughs at Dad's jokes even when they're not funny. That sounds promising. Do you think she'll want to marry Dad? I don't know, sweetheart. They're just getting to know each other. If she does marry Dad, will you like her better than Mom? Children ask the hardest questions. Lily, I don't compare people like that. I hope that if your dad finds someone new, she'll be kind and loving and good to all of us. But even if he doesn't find someone new, we'll still be a family, you and Max and Dad and me. Promise. Promise. That night, after David picked up the kids and I was alone in my house, I thought about how much had changed in less than a year. I'd gone from being a doormat grandmother to being the matriarch who set the terms for family relationships. It wasn't always comfortable. There were still tensions, still moments when David resented my conditions or questioned my decisions. But there was also respect now. There was appreciation. There was genuine love instead of obligatory contact. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Mrs. Thompson, this is Sarah, David's friend. He's told me so much about you and I was wondering if you'd like to have lunch sometime. I'd love to get to know the woman who raised such a wonderful man. I smiled and typed back. I'd love that. But fair warning. I have very high standards for people who want to be part of our family. I wouldn't expect anything less. Looking forward to earning your approval. Maybe this one would be different. But if she wasn't, if she turned out to be another Jessica who saw me as an obstacle instead of an asset, she'd discover what Jessica had learned the hard way. I wasn't just David's mother anymore. I was the woman who held all the cards. And I'd learned how to play them very well. If you're watching this video because you're dealing with adult children who take you for granted, let me leave you with this. Love without boundaries isn't love. It's enabling. You don't have to choose between being loving and being respected. You can be both. But it requires courage to set standards and stick to them, even when it's painful. My son learned that family isn't just about blood. It's about choice. Every day we choose to treat each other with respect, kindness, and consideration. When someone stops choosing you, you have every right to stop choosing them back. But you also have the right to leave the door open for genuine change. David and I have a better relationship now than we've had in years. Not because I rescued him from his mistakes, but because I made him accountable for them while still offering him a path back to my love. The kids spend every other weekend with me now, and they want to be here. They help me in the garden, we cook together, we talk about everything and nothing. I'm not just the emergency babysitter anymore. I'm their grandmother. And Sarah? She's been part of our family for 8 months now. She passed my tests, not because she kissed up to me, but because she genuinely values family and treats everyone with respect. The kids adore her. David is happier than I've seen him in years. And she calls me just to chat about books and recipes in life. Some stories have happy endings, but only when people are willing to do the work to earn them. Thanks for listening to my story. Hit that subscribe button if this resonated with you. And tell me in the comments, have you ever had to teach someone how to treat you? How did it work out? Your voice matters and your story matters too. Until next time, remember, you deserve respect. You deserve love. And you deserve relationships that honor both.